will be available to you from the Learning Technologies Forum Digital Hub next week. There will be transcripts of chat, etc. And with that, I'm going to go quiet and go off camera and move us forward to Rob's presentation. Thank you.
So hey everybody, thanks for joining us from all around the world today. It's great to see so many of you here. That's also going to be pretty cool because we've got quite a lot of interaction going on. So whenever I've got access to a load of, Julie T in Warwick, I'm in Leamington Spa, so there you go. We can probably wave to each other through our windows. So wherever I've got a group of really interesting and experienced people, I feel it's my duty to kind of ask interesting questions and harvest the answers from you all. So we're up to kind of heading towards 250 participants at the moment. If perhaps we've got an average number of years in the industry of maybe 10 years each, that's a huge amount of experience that we can all benefit from. So we're going to do various activities today as we move through to make use of all of that collective experience for the benefit of us all. Welcome to Efficient Blends for Behaviour Change and Impact Without the Baggage. For those of you who aren't in the UK, this is a saying that we have. Baggage is generally kind of, a bad reputation where something is thought of as not perhaps so good. It's often described as having baggage, and that may be the case for blended learning. So a bunch of you know me, but for those that don't, my background is in physical design. In engineering design. I moved into digital design 20 years ago, but I've brought a lot of that mindset, the problem solver mindset, and the kind of deep curiosity about the problems and challenges that we attempt to solve. In our case with learning technologies, I've brought that across. So been doing it for a while, been doing quite a lot of conference sessions. My company is LAS. And Judge Awards, which is brilliant. I strongly recommend that you all get involved in judging if you can, and was involved in co-authoring and editing the really useful e-learning instruction manual. So just so that you know a bit more about where this comes from. So our company, we've been around for 15 years, and we're deeply curious about human beings and what makes them tick. And what might help them change behaviour. We also have my kind of engineer's mindset of always wanting to be efficient and always starting simple and looking and seeing what works and measuring the impact that you have and learning from that. So our projects, we sort of describe them as sitting in the space between learning and capability building, between communication and engagement. I mean, this is a huge part of any learning project. Probably, arguably, even more important than the material that you put together. And very often we are either part of a bigger change or our job is to enable a change. So sometimes these are very small specific changes within a particular audience. Sometimes these are huge organisational changes across many hundreds of thousands of people. And we apply that same thinking throughout. And this thing here in the middle, empowering every person to learn to adapt and thrive so together we can make the world better. That really is what we exist to do, what we try to do in all of our projects. So something I would like to do now, my first bit of harvesting now, and we're up to 300 people, is I would like to ask you a question, and I want you to respond in a SurveyMonkey survey. So it's a single question, it's this question that I'm going to ask you to respond to. If you click on that link, it should open a browser window, and I'd like you to respond to that question with your free text. And what we're going to do after that is generate a word from 300 plus submissions from you all to give us a view on what the challenges are. So I'm just going to give you a second to do that now. Okay, wonderful. And just to let you know, we've just cleared the chat out, so there is going to be a record of all of the chat that's gone on, but just to keep it nice and light on the bandwidth, we've cleared that out. Okay, so hopefully that's given you enough time to submit. So now I'm going to share my screen with you, and we're going to take a look at the results. So let me just share my screen.
Whilst Rob's setting his screen share up, I'd like to draw your attention to underneath where the slides were and where Rob's screen is now going to appear. There is a please ask questions here box. To try and keep the questions separate from the melee of the general chat, please ask your questions there.
So this is wonderful. So I can see 180. Three responses. I'm just going to hit refresh again. So there's a few more still coming in. Now the reason that we've done this in SurveyMonkey is because you can now generate a word cloud. So wonderful. So this, we asked you about the big challenges that you have. So we've got things here. The big challenges coming out are around engagement, around change, around budget, which I would think is probably not increasing budget. It will probably be reducing budget, and need to do things more digitally. So these kind of challenges that we're coming up, we've got things around here, converting, different environment. So fatigue, there's an interesting word. Perhaps people are getting fairly fatigued with the way that things are being delivered. So we'll share this Wordle afterwards. We've also got all of those individual responses as well. So, I mean, what I hope you'll see here is that what we're going to share with you today is a methodology for blended learning. So that's based on a whole load of our thinking around the limitations of the human brain, around what people pay attention to and what they ignore, and around how to encourage behaviour change and influence attitudes. Now, with my engineers head on, it's designed to work in a very kind of lean and efficient way. And what I hope that you'll see is how you can use this approach to address a whole bunch of these needs that we've seen here. So I'm just going to stop sharing now and return back to my slides. So, I mean, quite often when I talk to people about blended learning, you get one of these kind of reactions that, yeah, blended, we know all about that, boring, boring. So blended learning, it's that thing, isn't it, that, yeah, you have a workshop and everybody loves the workshop because we love getting together with other humans, because we love to connect to other humans. But then you often have all these dreadful e-learning modules that you have to do before that really nobody bothers with. You just kind of wing it and turn up to the workshop. And then there's a load of resources afterwards that you're given that very few people actually read, and quite often they're fairly poorly chosen. That is a fairly old definition of blended learning, and for us blended learning is much more kind of subtle and expansive than that. So, you know, we've mapped the different forms of digital learning that there are, and we found that there's over 30 of them, or 34 that we mapped recently. And you know, for us, blended doesn't need people to be together face to face. It doesn't even need people to be together in real time like we are here. For us, blended just uses a mixture of modes of delivery, of forms that are the most efficient and effective way to help people achieve the behaviour change, to learn the skills, to be able to access the knowledge that they need to be successful, and therefore for the project and for the organisation to be successful. However, so what I'm not saying here, I'm absolutely not saying that blended learning is the way to go, that any project that you have, it needs to be blended. I'm not saying that. There are many different ways to meet a project's objectives, some of which involve learning, absolutely, and some of which will involve you know, blends, but others will involve process change, others will involve comms and engagement, changes to working patterns, all of these things. So we're not saying this is the answer to everything, it's not. But if you are going to do blended learning, the approach that we we recommend our next generation blended learning approach. Certainly does work very well. It does not remove the need for strong learning experience designers, or learning designers, if you want to call them that. So it's not a process that people that don't know the field and don't know learning technologies, yes, you can use the process, and it will make your blends kind of better than they would have been otherwise. But what the benefit of having strong learning experience designers are is, remember those 30+ forms of digital learning that I mentioned. A really good learning experience designer knows when to use those different forms, knows what they're good for and what they're not good for, knows what's quick and easy to do and what's really challenging and takes a load of time and budget. So having really great learning experience designers using this process means that you're being not just effective but also efficient as well. So something that it is very good for is it's a really kind of logical methodology. So it's kind of quite tough to argue with. So one of the big challenges that many of us have working with subject matter experts is the subject matter expert feels the need to put far more material in than we know is good for the learner, and it's sometimes difficult to argue with that. Next generation blended learning gives you a methodology, a framework, an approach to having those discussions. So yes, let's move on. So now we want to put you guys into the driving seat. So there are 6 principles that I have material on that we use. There's more than 6 principles that we base our work on, but there are 6 that I've picked that I think will be useful. I'd like you now to vote using the poll here below the slide on which one you'd like to learn about first. Now, we're not going to get through all 6. We'll certainly get through 2. We may get through 3. Let's see how we go. So just give you a second to vote in the polls. Okay, so it's creeping up. So Brain is creeping up there, but our winner is social. Okay, let's just see if Brain creeps up. No, okay. So Brain it is wonderful, and I don't. Sorry, social it is. Social is the first one that we'll do. So humans are social learners. So we are primates. And we live in social groups, so it's easy to forget just how closely related we are to other primates. We feel like we are a different thing. We feel like we are not part of the animal kingdom, which is perhaps one of the reasons why we see the world that we have around us. But we are social primates, so we live together. Naturally, we seek to connect to one another as well. I mean, it's why, interestingly, in people who are incarcerated, people in prison, one of the worst forms of punishment is being put in isolation. So we naturally want to work with other people. I mean, here this group of chimpanzees, you could imagine them discussing what the chimpanzee on the right is holding in their hand, or maybe learning about it. I don't know if you've seen any footage of chimps and other apes where they're learning using tools from each other. So we naturally want to connect to others, and we learn from them. Now, traditionally, digital learning, e-learning, in the traditional sense, has been a very solitary thing to do. So a very individual pastime that isolated us from our peers. And for me, I think that's a really unnatural way for us to learn. And I think it's why there's been so much pushback and so much bad feeling around the traditional e-learning module. Things are a bit better now. There are ways that we can connect socially, but some of you, I can see wonderfully, have already started doing this already. I'd like to harvest the ideas that you have for how we can apply this in a blend. So just put your ideas into the chat box below this slide. Let's see what we've got. I'll just give a moment for them all to keep coming in. Wonderful. So let's see what we've got. So peer-based activities from Dawn, absolutely. So things that you can do with others. So simple things like assignments, offline assignments, or buddying up. Working groups from Natasha. So great for putting learning into practice, teaming up with others and starting to apply that. So breakout rooms from Aisling there. So a great way that we can have more interaction between people. Large groups like this are wonderful, and there's certain levels of interaction that we can do. But what we can't do is all have our video on it, have our audio on it, talk to one another. Breakout rooms would help with that. So master classes, so learning from people who are real experts in an area to help us reach those kind of heady levels. From Arcana there, so coaching. So I'm sure you're all very familiar with coaching, but we see this in many different places, even in healthcare. Where the strength of the saying, teach somebody to fish and they'll never go hungry. It's the same with coaching. Helping people to learn to solve their own problems. Action learning groups, another brilliant way of working together. Action sets we've got there from Nigel. So breakfast and learn, lunch and learns, learning in pairs, roundtable follow-ups, discussion forums, Kahoot. Yeah, so that's a lot of fun, isn't it? Kahoot, I'd love to use that on one of these sessions. Agile Scrum project teams. So there's so many ideas there. What we'll do is we will harvest and share all of these after the event. So we've got, I don't know how many ideas we've had coming there, but loads and loads of great ideas. So we can all kind of make use of all of that from one another. So now I'd like you to vote again. So James, if we could move on to our next poll, please. So we've covered social. Which one do you want to go to next? So is it going to be brain? Is it going to be something else? Oh, brain is screaming ahead there. So I think that's a clear winner. So we'll jump to brain now. So that's number 5. So these principles, they're kind of the blindingly obvious, but I find the trouble with the blindingly obvious is it's very easily forgotten, and quite often we don't think deeply enough about this stuff. And something that I've found in my career, something that's really helped me, which may be something that surprises you, is I limit the input that I have. I limit the amount of stuff that I read. I don't want to take in thousands and thousands of social media posts. I don't want to read, hundreds of books and articles. I want to read the right stuff. I want to find out who should I be paying attention to? What are the things that I should be learning about? And then taking my time over learning those and trying to think about them as deeply as my brain and my abilities will allow me to do that. But certainly something that we've got in our skulls, our brains are incredible, complex, creative, empathic, connective brains. They are wonderful at doing things, even in the limited way that we can interact here. You can see how much connection we can have in person. We pick up on all of these different social cues and micro expressions, and we're so good at connecting to others, at building rapport. What the human brain is utterly useless at is storing vast amounts of information and calling it to mind incredibly accurately every time. In fact, the mere act of recalling a memory changes the memory. So that was something which was quite interesting for me to learn about, is that your brain is like it's like a DJ that's trying to please you. So when it recalls things from your past, it tries to paint you in the best possible light. It will also actively ignore and not take in things which go against your beliefs and values, and actively take notice of and remember things that do align your beliefs and values and back you up as what a clever, insightful and brilliant person that you are. Now, fortunately, although our brains are terrible at holding vast amounts of information, the devices that literally surround us at all times are brilliant at it. So, very simply, you'll see this in Next Generation Blended. Why don't we use the brain for the things the brain is good at? And why don't we use hard drives for the things that hard drives are good at? So I can see already you're way ahead of me, and you're starting to put your brilliant ideas into how to apply this into in a blend. So let's see what we've got here. So bite-sized sessions and curated content. Curation is a real art. So I think with curation, it should be, think about the experience in a museum. When you go to a really good museum and there's an artifact or an object there, and there's a card or there's an installation that very carefully explains to you the importance of this and its relevance in the collection and why it's there and where it came from. So don't curate things as in just kind of fligging stuff up for people far too much. So the human mind can only, I guess, store that much information at a time. So I think the latest thinking is 3 plus or minus 2 chunks of information. So there is an activity that I do when I'm at physical conferences where I get people to try and remember 10 disconnected words. So you can try this out yourself. And the light bulb that I hope comes on for people is, how many different pieces of information do you expect people to learn in the training that you design? And of course, it's far more than 10. It's many more than that. So Vicky, their hearts and minds activity. So that's a wonderful way that the brain can get up and take notice. As we saw in the first principle, we are social. And as part of that, we are very empathetic, and we're good at kind of picking up on the emotions of others, because that can mean threat or danger. It can bring us closer together, and if we're closer together as a social group, we're more likely to protect one another, protect one another's young. So being able to engage with people's emotion is a brilliant way to get the brain to sit up and take notice. It's why we listen to music that makes us feel something, why we watch plays, why we watch films. We all want to feel something as human beings. So Charlie there, scenarios and gaming. Yeah, so making the learning as realistic as we can do within the constraints of the project, so that we're learning through trial and through experience and through getting things wrong. I feel this form of learning this sort of pattern that we came into in the Industrial Revolution of treating people like machines. So input is learning. Here it is, I'm inputting my learning into you, and that's going into you like a machine, and you're holding it all, and then you can regurgitate that and bring that up perfectly when we need you to. Whereas in fact, of course, as we've evolved, living up in the trees or as hunter-gatherers, we've learned through trial and failure. I think increasingly that if learning feels easy, then learning hasn't really occurred. You either already knew it or you weren't really paying attention. There are exceptions, of course. You stick your hand in a candle, you learn very quickly that heat burns, and it's painful. But most of the learning that we do, I think it needs to feel effortful. So problem-solving task there by Louise Robertson. So by the act of applying something that we've learned, it's a form of, number one, it's repetition. So we're having to recall that and think about that in the light of this task that we're trying to do, this problem that we're trying to solve. But we're also, because we're trying to apply that and achieve an outcome, we're doing kind of deeper cognitive processing on it. We're making more links to what we know. We're thinking about it in different ways. So all of that encourages people to learn. So stories there from Manisha. So stories, as we mentioned, with emotion, it's a wonderful way that we can connect to others. So we've learned through storytelling. We can probably assume for as long as we've had language. And then you look at the cave paintings that go back thousands of years, and really they're there very often to tell a story or to teach. So there's some wonderful ideas there. So Letitia, art to represent concepts. What a brilliant idea! I love that. That is great. So let's see if we can. Let's squeeze another one in. So James, we can go to our poll again. So we've had social, we've had brain. So what would we like next? Which one's going to come out top? Good enough? Or is it going to be time? Time is creeping up. It's creeping up on us. I think, oh, it's so close. So close. I'm going to say, oh man, it's overtaken it. This is actually quite exciting. I didn't think this would be that fun. So time has picked it at the post at the last minute. So there you go. This one is that we all work in L&D, and we hope and we'd love to think that our learners, our audience, wait with bated breath for the next incredible piece of learning or performance support that we produce, so they can leap on it and then just consume it, and go through it and experience it, and try it out, and then just love it. But unfortunately, they generally have better things to do with their time. They have day jobs. We're in an unusual circumstance over the last few months where people have had more time to learn at home. That isn't obviously normally the case. Time is really precious, so we often say that the biggest cost in any learning project that goes out at large scale isn't the cost of commissioning it, isn't what you pay or your investment in time putting it together. It's the time cost of the audience going through it. So, if you can get people to a level of performance that they need to achieve and that you want them to achieve in a fraction of the time, in 20 minutes or 15 minutes rather than 45, and you multiply that by thousands of users, that's a huge saving to the organisation, absolutely huge. So let's have a look at some of these brilliant ideas coming in. Keep it focused and practical, absolutely. So stuff that they can just pick up. They can go and browse and find it. It's there. It's solving a problem for them. They can pick it up, learn it, apply it. Wonderful. The other thing that's great about that is we're short-circuiting the forgetting curve. So whatever you think of Ebbinghouse's research, I think we all get as human beings that we forget the majority of what we try to learn very rapidly. If you shorten the gap between when you need something and when you learn it and when you apply it, it's just going to help, isn't it? It's just going to help. So Manisha there, pacing the learning, so 20 minutes a day, so keeping it short for people. Yeah, micro-learning. I mean, I've heard people dissing micro-learning, and I'd love to have a conversation with them about it. I think the argument goes that if you cut up something that's crap, you get loads of small bits of crap. I'm not entirely convinced by that. I think that the trouble with big chunks of learning is they're kind of more fixed in the context that you can use them in. If you divide that up into much smaller things, those smaller things can be used in many different contexts. So you can then assemble them in different sequences and use them to solve different problems. And for us, when people ask us about, how do you make learning engaging? The answer is really simple. Make it relevant. Make it relevant to what the person needs to do. Make it relevant so it's how they solve the problem that's on their plate right then, and it's where they need it to be when they need it. So that really helps. So I mean, there's loads of wonderful ideas coming in. I did want to keep 20 minutes for this last bit, so you've got plenty of time to ask questions. So what we'll do is we will harvest all of the ideas that you've put in there for applying these different principles, and we'll publish those. We'll put them out on LinkedIn. We'll push them out on Twitter for you as well, along with the Wordle. We'll provide that as well after the session. So wonderful. Thank you, everybody. So we're now moving on to the next-gen blended learning approach. So those principles and more have kind of fed into this. And what I'm going to do now, I'm going to step you through each of these 4 areas. So don't worry that you can't read the text at the moment. We're going to zoom in on each of those. I'm going to step you through those, each of them quite slowly, and then we're going to take questions at the end. So as James mentioned, we've got a question box here down below the slide. So please post your questions there, because otherwise they're really easy to lose them in the chat. And also, we won't get through all of your questions, but we'll pick out a few of the kind of juicier ones, and we'll answer those again on LinkedIn and Twitter. I might just record little videos like this. It's a quick way to answer things. It's quicker to talk than type. In our next-gen blended learning approach, we divide the kind of body of what we want to impart to people into the knowledge that we want them to have access to, the skills that we want them to develop, the behaviours that we'd like them to adopt, and the attitudes that we want to influence and encourage people to take on. And then we subdivide each of those. So remember what we said about we looked at in our principle about the brain. So this is one of the places that we apply that. So we know the brain isn't very good at remembering things, so let's limit it. So we divide the knowledge that we want people to have access to into what we call the recall knowledge. So this is, we want people to hold this in their minds and instantly recall it, and it's not okay for them just to look it up in a few seconds, in 5 seconds say, from a device that they've got. Now this material is really important. We want to cover that multiple times in multiple ways over the course of the blend. So it's happening over a period of time, and we are covering that material in different ways. So we're not just, it's not like rote repetition of the same thing again and again. But you might give somebody the general principle at the start. You might show it in a basic example. You might ask them a question about it, a simple question that they have to apply. that they have to respond to. You might then get them to do something else. You might then get them to recall that principle and see it in a different setting, apply it in a harder setting. So these are all ways that we're reinforcing that. And then the other knowledge we call refer. So this is the stuff that is okay to look up in just a few seconds. And we say, just make that really easy to get to. So put it on the devices or device that the person's going to have in a form that is really easy for them to search or browse. So this could be, at a basic level, a PDF, could be a Word doc, could be intranet pages, could be a little knowledge app. What you're not doing is trying to think of ways to dress up and make engaging all of the refer information. It's there for people when they need it. And we literally will label stuff in the blend, whether it's recall or refer, and people know the recall stuff. Right, so this is what I need to focus on. So we recommend the recall knowledge should be 10 to 15% of the material. Now there's no science there, there's no study to back that up. What we want people to get is you need to minimize it. You need to make it as little as possible. Maximize the refer stuff. And how do you know what's recall and what's refer? Well, yeah, your subject matter experts, your stakeholders will be able to tell you. But also, very importantly, people who've just learnt the stuff and have put it into practice will give you an even clearer view of actually what you need to recall to do those tasks. And of course, that will vary in different roles. Okay, so that's knowledge. Skills. So we divide skills into high risk and low risk. So high risk is where there is a monetary, reputational, or physical risk to the individual or the organisation. So this is the important stuff. We really don't want people to get this wrong. So when you're coming together physically, when you're coming together digitally in real time, these are the role plays and the activities that you're doing. If you're building things digitally for people to do at their own pace, this is the place for your simulations, advanced scenarios, learning games, all things that encourage trial and error, learning through repetition, and learning through failure, so that you can reinforce, get people to practice those high-risk skills in as realistic a situation as you can manage within the constraints of your project. Low-risk skills are the flip of that. They add value, but they're not super critical. So typically we recommend these are just offline activities. So just things that you can try with a colleague or your boss or a friendly customer or your family at home or something like that. If they're online activities, they're not things that you're spending a lot of development time and budget on. So I think hopefully what you can see here is how we are focusing our development time and budget, and most importantly, remember what I said about time, our learners' limited attention and time on the most important stuff, the recall, knowledge, and the high-risk skills. So what this avoids you doing is building an amazing learning game that costs you a fortune, looks really cool, that is just teaching the wrong thing and doesn't really have impact. So it means that you're focusing your effort and your budget and your learners' time and attention where it counts. So behaviours. So we've been pretty successful at being able to influence behaviours over the years because we take a very human-centred approach to our projects. So we truly understand and believe that the secret of success in any learning or performance support project is understanding the people that you're trying to help. So some behaviours will be hard to change and others will be easy to change based on who your audience is, what their current situation is, what they're trying to achieve, what kind of things are pushing against that. So what's the kind of wider context of the change. So the place where we work the behaviours into, it goes into two places. Primarily, it goes into the overall personality, the overall design of the blend. So to give you an example, in a blend that we did recently, where the audience were trainers. Actually, I can tell you about this because we've done sessions on it. So this was with the BBC, and it was a blend to help trainers learn to use next generation blended learning, this approach. And one of the things that they were really nervous about was using technology, and the technology just not working, and feeling really awkward and embarrassed because of that. Who could imagine that, something going on with technology? So we designed it, the whole thing, to feel quite playful. So in the choice of the colours that we used, the language that we used, the written tone, how we were in the videos, how we facilitated it, all of these things, we made it feel kind of light and playful, and we used different technologies at different times in the blend, some of which we knew would work really well, and others that we thought will probably be a bit clunky. So they could be a bit clunky, and together as a group we could reflect on that and learn from that and change what we were doing based upon that. The other place we work behaviour change into is the communication and engagement campaign that fits around the learning program as well, but to a lesser extent. It's primarily the behaviours are in the blend itself. And then the final area is the attitudes, which of course can be very, very hard to influence, because you're working with people's deeply held values and beliefs. We do look at which are the attitudes that are likely to be pretty hard for people to adopt, and why, and how might we help them with those. So attitudes go into the same two places. So in the personality, in the overall personality and design of the blend, but to a lesser extent there. Primarily we focus on attitudes in the communication and engagement campaign. So in those same two places, behaviours, but the emphasis is flipped. So that is the next gen blended approach. So it's a pretty simple methodology. It kind of pulls together a bunch of things, and when we apply it, we literally create a mind map which looks like this. So there's nodes for knowledge, skills, behaviours and attitudes, and then there's sub-nodes for recall and refer for knowledge, high risk and low risk for skills, and hard to change, easy to change, and hard to adopt and easy to adopt for behaviours and attitudes. And you go through the material and you basically work with the users, and you work with the stakeholders and the subject matter experts, and you drop the content on these different nodes. And what that gives you very quickly is a sense of how big this challenge is for you. So if you went through that process for a particular topic, particular subject, and you found actually there's a lot of recall information, there's not a lot that's refer, they need to hold a lot of this in their head, there's a load of high risk skills, very quickly, for the sake of about a day's work, okay, so this is probably a project that we should be investing in, because this is going to be hard for people, and it's important stuff. Likewise, if you use this approach and you see actually there's very little refer, very little recall, most of it's refer, and the skills are all low risk, and the behaviour change is pretty straightforward, and people already have the attitudes that we want them to have. Fantastic. That's somewhere that you don't need to spend your money. You don't need to over-engineer it. So, whilst it is tempting to go with the kind of shiny tech, and, we love all technologies, and we love new technologies, we love old technologies as well, use them where they're going to have the most impact. So we've got a little under 10 minutes there, which was what I was aiming for, to have a look at your questions. So as we do that, so we've got a few coming in. Feel free to add more questions there. Let's see if we can get through these as many as we can. Oh, just to note as well, so the stuff that we do provide more free help. So I should explain, next generation blended learning, we're basically giving that away for free to anybody, because we've used it with many customers, we've developed it over many years. It's been successful with them in their projects, and it's had measurable impact there. It was also great that we won the blended learning award for it. So, as assessed by a panel of our peers that know a lot about blended learning, they've gone that they really like it. BBC have adopted it, other big customers have adopted it. So that's free to anybody. There's a bunch of other things which you can access as well, so long as you're not a direct competitor of ours. If you're just a user or an individual, we've got, you can basically pick my brains for half an hour on how to apply this. We've got our mailer, which is open to anyone, the knowledge tree. We run a free course as well, which is not, it doesn't focus primarily on blended, it's like the level above that, on learning experience design, and we've kept that free. We just take donations for a charity for that. And the digital learning diagnostic is a tool that we have. Remember those 34 forms of digital learning? It's a tool that kind of will give you a subset of those for a particular project. So yeah, feel free to take advantage of those. So just looking around the blended, let's the questions on blended. So just looking for the questions in here. So Megan, can you create blended learning that's, I'll make this text bigger, I'm cross-eyed. Right, that's better. Can you create blended learning that's more about the individual saying, here's the stuff I want to know about, how to do X, Y, Z, and can you offer pick and mix resources, or is that just Google? No, absolutely, Megan, you can. So somebody mentioned micro-learning earlier, so small chunks of learning that are assembled around, could be a task that somebody needs to undertake, could be a part of a process that they need to follow, could be a problem that they might hit, could be a responsibility of a role. So all of these are things that are around the stuff that the user wants to do. So it's a really useful activity to find out from your users what do they want from this stuff that we're putting together. So a subject matter expert will be very good at giving you all of the subtopics and all of the stuff that will go in there and all of that, and laying it all out very logically because they're immersed in all of this. Actually, your audience will probably only want a fraction of that, and if you can find out what that fraction is and package that in a way that's right for them, they can self-serve from that. There are, of course, platforms that will do this for you. Everybody's going nuts for AI and machine learning, and it does work if you have really big sets of data. You need huge amounts of data for these systems to learn from and be able to make realistic recommendations. So those systems will come, but you can do it in a real kind of lo-fi way. As I mentioned, we always start with what's the simple approach that we can take to meet a need, to achieve something for a user. So Mel there, any ideas how to deliver scenario-based sessions that usually use forum theatre on a virtual platform? So I guess forum theatre, is that, so Mel, is that theatre with actors? Is that what you're referring to? If so, yes, with actors. What an awesome learning experience that must have been. I mean, something that we're starting to experiment now, because the kind of cost of use is starting to come down, is VR. So there are some nice platforms that we're starting to look at that don't cost a great deal to use. And whilst you won't, of course, get the level of expression that you would do being physically somewhere with a skilled actor, there are still things that you can do there. You can play out scenarios within an environment that people can move around within. In terms of theatre, I love those immersive theatre experiences like Secret Cinema and the other kind of theatre experiences where the audience follow the actors around the set and watch the story unfold. So you could use that kind of approach. I mean, you could even use Zoom and technology like that and have people on video kind of acting stuff out. Of course, you'll lose the context of the environment that you're in, but that would be a really cool thing to try out in VR. In terms of the platform, we're having a look at Mozilla Hubs at the moment. So another brilliant project from Mozilla. Free, open source, well supported by them, a reasonable sized community of users there, and works in your browser. You don't need a headset, you can just use standard browsers for that. So what else have we got? I'm just looking through the questions. A few of them are statements and responses to other people. So people want to create a social learning group from the attendees of this call. So maybe that's something that could be done in the Learning and Skills group, or maybe a group in LinkedIn or something like that. What else have we got? So John, don't we sometimes focus very hard and carefully on the very best design to affect attitudes and behaviours when the elephant in the room is the disconnect with business leaders? Engagement, absolutely, John. Yeah, so you may do an incredible job at either achieving something which is not the right thing, which isn't aligned. So I should add, you know, this is the kind of blended learning part of the process. Before all of this, like we do, it's not a big piece of research, but we need to understand how does this project fit in the overall strategy of the organisation. So what is it going to help you to do? How is it going to save you money or make you money or make people safer? What's driving this? You know, what's going to be the benefit from this? Yeah, absolutely. That you still, yeah, there is a danger that you fix the wrong problem, and you know, that comes from your the kind of questions that you ask as the team or the individual or the company that are doing that work. And we kind of feel a responsibility that we do that, and we kind of try and explore as much as possible. We want the stuff that we do to have impact. we want it to genuinely help person, to empower every person. Otherwise, really, what's the point in it all? There's other things that we can be doing. I'm just seeing if I can squeeze one more question in before time. So Alison there, how do we help reluctant online learners to embrace blended learning? I mean, I think that the swing to full digital, which was really kind of tempting for people that were buying and selling solutions, because the people that are selling solutions make more money. For the people that are buying solutions, it's nice and simple. Oh, we just buy this thing, we buy this platform, we buy this library, we plonk it there. Job done, I've done my bit. Where, of course, what we're missing out is that human connection. So I think by designing blends that maintain and possibly even enhance the stuff that people like about the existing training that they're getting, the social elements, you can build that in. You have to think about it. It's not an easy, straightforward thing to do, but you can build that in so that people really do. And I do genuinely think that blended, it gives you the best of both worlds. I think, combining the two, making sure that we don't forget the human, that we are very human-centered in what we do, is going to help. So I can see we're moving to the wrap-up slide there. So you can download a set of the slides in PDF from the bottom there. We'll put together, we'll pull out all of those great ideas that you've contributed on those 3 principles. So we'll get that out to you. The word cloud.
Fantastic.
So we can
well, I'd like to say a big thanks and give a round of applause to Rob. That was a fantastic session. And I actually think we were doing blended learning there. So blended learning in a virtual session, 380 people. I think that's quite an achievement. I had some time to listen to the content because things were running quite smoothly, and I learned a lot too. I learned so much from everybody else, and for me that's a key takeaway. I would love to talk more, but we do have to end this session. We have another session starting shortly, and we can't have the 2 things overlapping. There are some resources there on screen, as Rob has mentioned. So Rob's download, he's provided you with a PDF. Underneath the useful resources, to the left-hand side of the chat, it says Files to download. Click on the title LTSF Rob Hubbard Blended 02. When you click on it, you'll see a download button becomes valid or ungrayed. You click on the download, it will open that download link in a browser. So if I close this meeting room, you'll still be able to download it, but you need to click on the file name, click on download, and then it will be there for you to download in your browser. So thank you very much again. That was a great session. Thank you all for coming. It wouldn't have been the same without you. We all learned together, and we will see you in the next session. Bye.